I've honestly had to deal with death and dying throughout different parts of my life. First instance of death and dying I had to deal with when I was 8 was when I was 8 when my grandfather he died from colon cancer, and I didn't have much of a relationship with him because I didn't have really remember too much about him from when I was like a like little kid. And I just remember when I was at the funeral, I was comforting my grandmother, and I remember seeing my dad on the other side of the room, and with my other grandmother, and I remember thinking, he's why do people have to die? I didn't voice my this sort of question I had at the time because I was actually pretty shy back then. And then when I was 10, I found my great grandmother died, and I was actually really sad about that. I remember crying, and because my mom had told me the night before, and I just didn't want to. I just couldn't handle it, but I still had to go to school, and then I cried at lunch, and my friend took me to the nurse's office to calm down. And that was just such a sad time. And that instance of death and dying was when I was, actually when I was 18. Yeah, this was from my uncle. I had found out that he was, in the hospital, like, before, like, a few days before he died, and I was in a Christian, Christian, like, group at my school at Northeast Lakeview at the time for getting my associate's degree, and I remember that day I hadn't known that he had passed, and I remember having to pray that he was to get better, and he only to find out a few hours later after I had done that praying that he was already dead. And I just remember thinking, well, why did he have to die? He was a good person from what I can remember, because honestly, okay, well, first, a little background information. My family was kind of spread out throughout. Me and my mom living in Texas, my dad, my parents were divorced, living up in Iowa with his mom and his brother was living in some of the surrounding states surrounding Iowa, and I alone would traveled up there for his funeral, and I just remember crying so much and having to get up and give a speech. I got up and gave a speech during the wake service, and I just remembered, oh my gosh, I babbled on. My dad was telling me to kind of just come move it along so I didn't spend up all day up there kind of repeating myself because I was sad, and it's just so bad. Fast forward to 5 years later when I thought my dad was dying when he was got a case of pneumonia. I was my mom, my brother, and I traveled up to Iowa, and my dad, he was just in this comatose state, and I remember thinking, I don't want my dad to die. I don't want to lose him. It was sad, and I was trying to be brave because my brother, I didn't know how much he knew about death or dying. I was just trying to be there for my dad and my grandma, who was just sad, and it was really hard. But my dad, he did recover, so. And then 3 years later, my grandma died, and that was one of the most devastating things I've kind of had to deal with this year, because I was really close with my grandma, and I remember my dad, he called me, like, we were literally right near the end of spring break and this year, and I remember crying and singing, just going through all these different emotions, like kind of anger. Why did she have to die? She was a good person. She wasn't supposed to die. And then having a conversation with it about my grandma with my dad, and it was his mom. He knew her longer than I did, and it's just really sad. And I just kind of felt like bad because I couldn't be there for them when she died, because it was when COVID was first starting, and I couldn't do any long-term traveling like that. I was still in school. I was in psychology classes, and I was just kind of doing a lot, and I just kind of haven't really dealt with her death too much. I kind of have, but at the same time, it's just, I honestly just wish you was still here right now to deal with the fallout from her, because it was just been really bad. I don't want to get into details, because that's not related to this discussion board. Honestly, my experience with death and dying is kind of different than what you see in the media. I mean, on media, like, you see, there have been some TV shows where you actually see people get so mad over someone dying, or when they're and hurt at the same time, where they will kind of just go on this emotional sort of thing where they start trashing their own room, or crying, and they feel that so depressed that they don't want to live anymore, and which honestly I've never have gotten to that point where I didn't want to live anymore. I kind of that's not what I went through, but I was just have kind of gone through this thing where people have tried to tell me, oh, they're at peace after death, and then that conflict with what I know from the Christian religion I've been taught about. So it's I've kind of had these conflicting views been told to me about, like, where people go after they die, and the only consistent one that I've actually known is that my grandfather died. He became a Christian before he died, so he kind of went with the Christian religion stuff that I was taught about, so that was more of a consistent thing that I was told about.